Hey, it's David McLaughlin, and this is the beginning of season 3 of the Mindful Leader podcast, and I am so excited. We have some changes. The first change you may or may not have already noticed is that we are not batching the season. If you don't know what that means, in the previous 2 seasons, I released all 12 episodes all at once. Well, this season we're not doing that. There's some reasons for that. I won't go deep into them. The simplest explanation is that it makes it easier for people to stay caught up. I've learned when we just release one episode at a time. I prefer personally to release all of them all at once, but I've learned that it's easier for people to stay caught up when we just release them one at a time. So that's what we're going to start doing. So starting with this episode, we're just going to release them 1 week at a time. The other new thing is we are not only releasing them on all of your favorite audio podcast platforms, such as Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and all the other streaming platforms, but we're also releasing them on video. So you can watch on YouTube, on my website, wherever we're releasing them. I'm not even sure where all we're putting them out now, but you can watch on video also. So that's a new thing we're starting this season. But listen, before we start this season 3, we have over 25,000 downloads of season 1 and 2, and I just cannot thank you enough for listening to the Mindful Leader podcast. When I started this, I had no idea if anybody would listen, but I am so grateful for everyone who's listening. But let's get right into this episode. Nancy Jane Smith is the author of The Happier Approach, and this is the book we are going to talk about in this episode. But Nancy Jane Smith, she is a licensed professional counselor. She's written 3 books. She's just an amazing person. And the thing that I think about when I think about talking to her and meeting her is she is so authentic, genuine, down to earth, humble. She's super smart, friendly, but she just came across as so authentic. And I know that you're going to love her and learn so much from her. Get ready for season 3, episode 1, Nancy Jane Smith, the Mindful Leader. Nancy Jane Smith is a licensed professional counselor, trainer, and author specializing in high-functioning anxiety. Nancy completed her postgraduate training in Gestalt therapy. Am I saying that right? Gestalt?
Yep. Gestalt therapy. Yep.
At the Gestalt Institute of Central Ohio, and is a certified Daring Way facilitator based on the research of Dr. Brené Brown. She has 15 years in private practice and over 20 years working as a counselor and coach. Nancy has written 3 books with tips, lessons, and stories on reducing anxiety. Most recently, her book, The Happier Approach: Be Kind to Yourself, Feel Happier, and Still Accomplish Your Goals, which is what we're going to talk mostly about today. Nancy lives with her husband and her 3 furry kids, Gus, Calvin, and Watterson, in Bexley, Ohio, which is right in the middle of Ohio. And she is a Bengals fan, Cincinnati Bengals fan, but I will not hold that against her, me being a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So we talked a little bit about that when we met this morning, but I won't hold that against you, Nancy. Nancy, I appreciate you being here.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here and have the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, we were talking a minute ago about how I ran across you. A lot of the guests we have, I know, or I've met at conferences or different
Mm,
places, and you and I have never met.
mm-mm.
I was trying to remember how I ran across you. I think somebody recommended one of your earlier books to me. This Stuff Is Hard: Making Peace with Your Anxiety, which was a really good book. And that was how I originally wanted to interview you this
Mhm,
season, was for that book. But then I saw you had a more recent book
mhm.
called The Happier Approach. And so I was like, oh, well, let's talk about that. That sounds good. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into it, let's just have everybody meet you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you got to where you are now.
Well, I grew up just south of where I live now in a rural area, and this we're getting ready to have a big family reunion in a week, and at my mom's house, and so it just this time of year with the fireflies and it's just a happy time thinking about living out there on the farm. And so I studied psychology in undergrad and then went into the world of human resources, thinking that I could change the world through human resources. But I quickly found out that human resources is a necessary evil for a lot of companies, and especially the company that I landed at. So I got out of that quickly because it wasn't doing the human touch that I wanted to have, and was bitter and burnout, and went working in real estate. And I did that for a few years, and I decided I was doing real estate appraising, and I was an office manager for them. And then I decided I wanted to get into counseling. And so I went and started my master's in counseling. And I dropped out of that, went in and started working for got a master's in college student personnel. And I started working with college students, and I loved working with college students, and that developmental time that they're in. But it's a repetitive. And I wanted to dive a little deeper than I could. So I went back and got my master's in counseling, and I started working in private practice. And I found that a lot of people had this voice of the inner critic. And I was doing career counseling in private practice, and I discovered that people love the process of figuring out what they want to do and learning and taking the personality tests. And I'm going to learn all about myself. But when it comes to implementing the plan of, oh, this is what I'm going to do next in my career, they ended up coming back to me like 6 months later saying, okay, let's go back and do those personality assessments again, because I must be wrong. And so I ended up realizing, wait, it's self-doubt and anxiety and this inner critic that I call the monger that's keeping them from moving forward. And so I switched my practice more focusing on this self-doubt inner critic. And then I got more into anxiety and that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's I can see how you got to where you are, especially working with college students a lot. I'm sure that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. Well, let's dive into that. So first of all, you have the book, The Happier Approach: Be Kind to Yourself, Feel Happier, and Still Accomplish Your Goals. And why that book? You've written some other books. Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, this book really came out, and I've called it kind of a love letter to my dad. It came out from his death. He died in January of 2018 and had January of 2017. He had Parkinson's with dementia, and he died relatively suddenly, which was a blessing. It's one of those, like, we were just debating, are we going to put him in a home? What are we going to end up doing? And then he fell and died. And so his death really took me to my knees. I mean, he was my rock. He was I just adored my dad. I still do. And, but he had a vicious monger who, even as he was dying, he still felt like a failure. So here was this man, 78, had raised 3 kids, had his own insurance company, this beautiful house that he was so proud of, and he still was a failure in his eyes. And I thought, oh my gosh, we need to stop this, because I was doing the same thing, And around that same time, I went to at this time, I'm doing a lot of work on mongers. I'm helping people with mongers, and I go to a presentation. I'm presenting, and a friend of mine's there, and I'm talking about the monger. and how awful it is. And she comes up and she's like, I totally agree with you. The monger is a terrible thing. That was a great presentation, but I'm not getting rid of my monger. I need it or I won't get anything done. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like, I believe that too, even though I'm teaching people to get rid of their monger secretly, I'm at home, believe in everything she's saying. And so that was the inspiration, was to let's figure this out once and for all.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I'm sorry about your dad, but what a great tribute to him. So tell us, you've mentioned the monger. Tell us what a monger is.
So the monger is the voice in your head that is telling you that you can't do it, that you're a failure. It's that running inner commentary of, just how terrible you are. And she criticizes everything we do. And there are some people that have a monger. Everyone has a monger. There are some people that have a monger that's, just there kind of giving some commentary. She's not running your life. She's just kind of there and she's annoying. But then there are other people, and I would be one of them, that monger is just on a daily basis, just running the show and is so believable. And there isn't really a separation. Like, I had to work hard to build a separation between myself and my monger, because I thought my monger's voice was the voice, was the truth. And so recognizing that she wasn't the truth and that I could build another voice to listen to was part of this work.
Yeah. And so you talk in the book about how some of the things the monger says. So let's go a little bit more into that. Tell us a little bit more about some of the things the monger tells you.
Well, she's mean. So just to go over a couple things she's told me this morning, to give some real life examples. I was running late to this interview. So as I, just a couple minutes late, I sat down and I didn't have my headphones. So, normal person, I got to run downstairs to get my headphones. But as I'm running downstairs, oh my God, here you go again. You're always running late. This is what you always do. You procrastinate and then you forget things. How could you do this? You're so stupid. Now you look so unprofessional. So that's just the 30 seconds it took me to run downstairs and run back upstairs. That's her commentary. She can commentary on what we're, how much we weigh, what we look like. Oh my God, I can't believe you're so tired. You shouldn't be tired. What are you tired about? So the problem with the monger is even normal everyday things like me forgetting my headphones is just a normal thing. She comes in for the jugular on that stuff and can really then can drive the rest of my day. See what a loser I am. I'm so late. I'm always never on time. So she tends to go after the things that we value. She tends to repeat the messages we got as children, the things that our parents valued. She jumps on. So that's kind of the voice of the monger. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. When I was reading the book, I had the thought about, I was curious, like, where the monger comes from. What's the source of the monger? And for me, when I was reading the book, and I'm sure it's different for different people, but I was thinking, and I don't want to put you on the spot or put you in a hard spot, but I always say when I do these interviews, it's just like us having lunch and talking. So this is just like us having lunch and talking. But I was thinking, for me, like, I grew up in a very, very strict religious upbringing. And I thought, yeah, my monger is like, it's a religious voice, kind of like, you can never be enough. You can never do enough. You can never get there. You can, whatever you do, it's not enough because you were born bad. You know what I mean? Like, because of original sin or whatever. It's like, you're inherently bad, so you can never accomplish enough. And I thought, that's the monger voice in my head. Do you think that's a common thing, or that it's a religious thing, or it's just different from all kinds of people?
I think it's different for all kinds of people. And I think part of it, but I do think that religious theme is a common one, because the monger's voice is shame. And religion has a ton of
Right.
shame. Those messages you're talking about are shame messages. There is redemption and shame all wrapped up together, unfortunately.
Sure.
Or that it has to be, because you can't have redemption without shame.
Right.
But so yeah, anytime it's that, when I hear my voice, I think of my dad, because he had that, he externalized the monger voice. And so what I find fascinating is my voice isn't that I'm flawed, it's that you're better than this. So it isn't I'm inherently flawed. It's like, you're better than this. What are you doing? You quit showing the world what a slacker you are when you're better.
Right.
So it's a reverse. It's equally shaming, but in a reverse way.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right. So you have some myths that you talk about in the book. I want to go through these, let you touch on each one of these. So some of the things the monger talks about or brings up, you have the myth of the finish line. Tell us about that.
So this is, you kind of alluded to this a little bit ago. This is the idea, and I think of like a track coach, because I ran track and I had a really stereotypical tough track coach. And it's like, I think of her standing there in her tracksuit, and it's like she blows the whistle and you're done. But then she moves and she's like, oh, actually it ends over here. You're at the wrong finish line. So it's that when I get my college degree, then it'll be okay. When I get married, then I'll be okay. Oh, I just need that promotion. Then it'll be okay. And it's never, you get there and there's more crap, if there's always something else. And I even find it when I'm done with this interview, then I can relax. And it's like, no, because then at 11:15, I'm going to be on to the next thing. So I'm not going to relax. That's the idea. She keeps us believing that we can get there and we can win.
Yeah, but you never can. Right. Then there's the myth of the good person.
So this is definitely a religious, the myth of the good person. I need to be, a good person does blah, blah, blah. And so there are these specific rules, and they're, specific to you of what a good person does. And if I could be a good person, then I won't have this inner critic talking all the time. So I just need to be a good person, whatever that is. And that again isn't true, because the rules keep changing on what a good person is. You can always be better.
Then you have the comparison myth.
So that's the idea, and social media makes this, so easy to do. And I often say the phrase of, we compare our insides to other people's outsides. And so it's the idea of, I'm sitting over here struggling and feeling crappy about myself. And then I look at my neighbor and they have it all together and they're going on this beautiful vacation and da, 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 da. Well, I don't know what's going on with them, really. And so it's the myth of the idea of, they have it better. I just need to be like them. It's again, what the monger does is she forces us to look outside of ourselves to find what we should be doing. And the answer is, we need to be looking inside of ourselves for what we should be doing. So it's a counter.
Right. Then you have the right way myth.
So this kind of goes with that the good person thing, but I put that one in there because this is a big one for me. There's a right way to do things, even down. And I think I put the example, like there's a right way to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I have to be the most efficient at doing it. And so I know when my anxiety gets high, this myth jumps in for me that I think I could control everything if I can just do it right. If I get the right doctor, if I get the right med, if I do it the right way, whatever it is, this one is personally for me is a very addictive myth that I get trapped in.
Yeah, I see this one in the corporate world a lot when I'm coaching people, that if especially for leaders, like if they don't do it my way, then I'm not happy. But there are a lot of ways to get things done.
Yes.
It's really frustrating for people if they don't do it their way. Yeah. There's the worry and vigilance myth.
So this is one that is the idea for people that have a lot of anxiety, really. And if I worry enough, it won't come true, or I can control it. And so this is just a way we're using our brains when things are out of control. And if I worry about my kids getting home, when they're out, they'll get home safely. Well, it doesn't matter if you worry or not. They're going to, if I'm vigilant about my mom and I protect her and make sure she's safe, then nothing will happen to her. Well, no, that's really not how it's going to happen. So that myth again keeps us stuck in something outside of ourselves, of pushing and worrying, rather than just honoring the fact of, yeah, it's scary to be this out of control.
It is fascinating to me the amount of energy people spend worrying, but they believe that the worry is productive because, well, since I'm worrying, then I'm thinking about the things I need to take care of. Then I do the things I need to take care of. Thus, my worry is actually fixing things.
Yes, it's a I have I hate this phrase, but a therapist of mine used it years ago and it fits. It's mental masturbation. It's just, spinning and spinning and spinning on something. And because you're spinning, it feels, as you said, like you're doing. Right. But it's the idea of, oh, I need to remember this. I'm going to write it down and then let it go. And then I'll go do it. Or even the idea, the example of I'm going to work out, or starting Monday, I'm going to do a whole new diet and I'm going to make up the whole plan of how that's going to go. And I'm going to write it all out. And then I don't take action. I just am doing the thinking about how it's going to go. That's a slight deviation from the worry, but it's the same concept. We got to take action to move beyond the monger.
Yeah. The worry is a form of planning or something versus taking action. Mm-hmm. And corporations do this. This is a little askew, but corporations do this in that corporations love strategic planning, mm-hmm. and they will make plans every couple years, but they don't execute on the plans. They continue to plan and plan and plan. They have all kinds of plans. They'll make strategic plans every few years. If they would just execute on the plans they have, things would go well. There's research on this.
I'm sure
they do more planning and less execution. And if they would just execute on the plans they've already made, they would be mm-hmm. much more successful. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, I'd never made that connection until just now, but it's akin to worrying. The corporate mm-hmm. form of worrying is making strategic plans.
Yes, exactly.
And then not executing on them. So,
and then the other thing I do want to say about that, as you were talking, it made me think, like, I think there is something to be said, especially in corporate or anywhere, for like giving yourself space to think, to contemplate what's the next thing I want to do, or how do I want to move forward? And, like taking time to do that. That right. is different.
Yes.
From worrying about something or overthinking it, and I think sometimes we confuse those, that we think, right. oh, I'm taking time to think this through. Well, you're not really thinking it through. You're just repeating the same stuff over and over again. Right. And giving yourself space means I'm not thinking about it.
Right.
I'm allowing it to percolate in my brain, in other parts of my brain, not in the, right here in the front consciousness part.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Then the last one is the myth, and I love this one. This is my favorite one. The myth that we need the monger.
Yes. So this is my favorite one too. And this is the hardest one to let go of for people. It was for me, is the idea that without the monger, I won't get anything done. The monger is my motivation. She is the thing that's keeping me on task. And she may be the thing that's keeping you on task right now, but that's why it's so important to let go of her, because the truth is, and you can be motivated to move forward with kindness. That's the only thing we're changing here, is in this concept of the happy approach, is the idea of how am I motivating myself? Am I motivating myself with shame, which is the monger, or am I motivating myself with kindness? And we have the belief that we need the shame because that's how we were, taught. So we're motivated growing up. And so it's a totally foreign way of thinking of, oh, I can be kind to myself. I mean, that's why the subtitle is Be Kind to Yourself and Still Accomplish Your Goals, because I did not believe that was possible. Right. I thought I had to, I was a big believer in this myth. I thought I had to, it's like the friend, what she said to me, I need this monger. And the truth is, when you can motivate yourself with kindness, it's just so much less stressful and less anxiety, and life is a little more fluid and it isn't so black and white and rigid anymore.
Yeah, that's so good. You talk about some things that people try to overcome this monger and this shame
Mhm.
that kind of society and tradition gives us that don't always work. And I think you have an interesting take on it. So you talk about self-acceptance and compassion. You talk about positive thinking and gratitude, and how
Mhm.
those things, if not done properly, can not work. Talk about those three.
Well, I'm going to start with gratitude because that's the one that gets the biggest praise, and I give it the most flack. Gratitude is awesome. Let me just go on record saying gratitude is awesome. What we have done with gratitude, though, is we have taken it as a way to prevent us, to kind of stop us from suffering. And suffering is needed in life. Like, there's suffering, and so we will take gratitude and say, I should be grateful. I hate my job. I don't like going here, but I should be grateful that I have a job. And what that does is that prevents you from really seeing let me allow what's underneath that. We kind of stop ourselves. So where I see, I'll talk more about the bads about gratitude, but let me talk about where gratitude is so good is in the present moment. And it's, I talk about going deep, not wide with gratitude. So it's not, I should be grateful I have a job. There is no should in gratitude. I'm driving to work. I don't like my job. I'm feeling unfulfilled. Okay, but I got to go to work. I got to get through the day. Okay, let's pull in some gratitude in the present moment. I'm grateful the sky is blue. I'm grateful that my son gave me a hug this morning. I'm grateful that, my husband got up and we were able to have a conversation. So those things I am really grateful about, but they have nothing to do with work that I have just established that I'm not really a big fan of. And so then later I can dive into that more. What is it about work I'm not a fan of? Do I need to make some changes? But sometimes gratitude stops us from being able to dive into the things that we really need to take a look at. I see, I was, a friend of mine was dealing with cancer, and she was saying, one of the things that drove her the most crazy was, well, I should be grateful that I only have stage 1 or I only have stage 2. Well, you still got stage 1 or stage 2. Like, this is still a big deal,
Right.
No, you're not stage 4, but to you, in your world, stage 2 is huge.
Sure.
And so I think that's the stuff we need to start acknowledging with gratitude. The same thing with positive thinking. Positive thinking changes us, it's think positive, stop thinking like that. It's a shame-based way of talking to yourself. Be positive. And I think so all of these concepts are super nuanced. We all know people that, my brother is one of them. We call him the black swan. He just sees the world negative. And so he comes into a situation and just puts a black cloud all over everything. And that's, I'm not going to turn to him and say, be positive. He just doesn't have it in him. But I need to not take on his negativity either. So I think we need to be kind of aware of that idea of that positive thinking and gratitude, when they're used to stop us from suffering, are not helpful. When they are used to get us into the present moment, give us kind of a reality check on how, that we do really have benefits and positivity in our lives, that's a great thing. Now, the self-compassion and self-acceptance, that was just my personal, when I was researching, what do you do about the inner critic? It would be love yourself no matter what. And I'm like, I have so many things I want to change about myself. How am I possibly going to love myself no matter what? Like that, it just was, I couldn't get there. And so the idea of self-acceptance and self-compassion just did not, my cat Calvin's his tail's making an appearance. I did not have it in me to figure out what those were, but I knew I could be, and this came after the book, this concept or this phrase, loyalty. And I knew I could be loyal to myself no matter what. I could be kind to myself. So no matter what happens in my life, I'll prompt myself to be like, where can we be kind here? I can say, oh, I don't want to be a person who runs late. I don't want that in me. And I try to not be that person, but I have that in me. And so I need to be kind about that part of me, not just shaming that part of me.
Yeah, I love the concept of self-loyalty. I think that is fantastic. That's really good.
Because people
We-
know, let me just go, people know what loyalty means. They know how to be loyal to their loved ones. And so it's an easy one to flip around. Wait, what would I say to my husband here? Oh, I would be way kinder than I'm being to myself.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. And with positivity, I always think like because I like positivity, but I also believe there's such a thing as toxic positivity. And
That's what
where,
I'm talking about.
yeah. There's such a thing. Like I always say, like, with the lawn, like I can think positively about the lawn, but at some point I have to go out and mow it. I can't think so positively about the grass that it will mow itself. I have to go out and mow the lawn.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
So
Well
I think those are great thoughts. You talk in the book, so we've talked about the monger, but you have two other voices that you talk about. So introduce us to these other characters.
So on one extreme is the monger, and that's the inner critic. And then on the other extreme is the character I call the BFF. And she's the BFF because this is the character that I would often bounce to from the monger. The BFF comes in and she's like, oh my God, you're amazing. Everything you do is fabulous. And don't worry about, being late. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Let's go have a donut after this. That's what we deserve. She's very...
I think of the BFF as the enabler.
She is totally the enabler. Yes. Yeah. So everything we do is great. Everything is fabulous. Where she, and this is where I lived for a long time, but where she gets us in trouble is because she has no boundaries. So she's the one telling us to stay up late, drink that extra glass of wine, have the third donut. And also, if anything goes wrong, it's someone else's fault. So she's the one that's engaging in judgment and gossip and all of that sort of stuff. So I unknowingly, and it's embarrassing to admit it, I lived with that BFF, man. I found so much comfort with her and would go out with my girlfriends and we just swam in BFF, talking about the people that annoyed us and and no self-reflection was happening at all. But the monger energy is too much. The shame is too overwhelming. And so I have to ease that. And so I go over here to the BFF that's telling me that I'm amazing and everyone else sucks and just keep doing it.
And a connection I'm making right now is like self-acceptance and self-love, I think is a good thing, but you can kind of draw on that BFF when you live in that self-love incorrectly.
Yeah. Yes, that was my problem, that I would say, I'm giving myself self-love. I'm taking the afternoon off and I'm going to drink a bottle of wine and eat, a bag of donuts. Well, is that self-love? Really? No, I'm not moving anything forward,
Right.
Or I would tell, I have a day reserved where I'm going to write. Before I know it, I'm upstairs writing. And then before I know it, I'm downstairs and I'm sitting on the couch eating Reese cups, watching Real Housewives. And I don't know how I got there. Well, I got there because my monger was so loud that my BFF said, hey, let's go downstairs. Let's take a break. And then so she's sneaky in how she shows up. Now, then the middle character is the character I call the biggest fan. Now, if I could go back, I would rename so that it wasn't bees and all,
Right, sure.
But the biggest fan is that voice of self-loyalty. So she's the voice that comes in and says, oh, Sweet Pea. I have my biggest fan calls me Sweet Pea. And she says, oh, Sweet Pea, this is hard right now. We are struggling and it's going to be okay. We'll get through this. What's the next thing we need to do? And so, she is that voice of kindness and compassion and loyalty. And she also is the voice that's going to say, get your butt off the couch, sweetie. We have goals that we want to accomplish and they're not going to be accomplished here. So what can we do today? What's one thing we can do?
I love it. I really like your contrast. You've got the monger who's like the bad is like the devil sitting on your
Yes,
shoulder,
yeah.
and then you've got the BFF who seems like a friend, but it's actually another devil sitting on your
Yes,
shoulder.
yes,
Really?
yes, yeah,
Yeah. And then you've got the biggest fan who's like your angel, who's like your
yes,
coach, your true friend, who's like, I love you. Let's do this the right way.
yeah.
That's really good. So I'm trying to decide which way I want to go with this. So we're going to get here in a minute to how the angel, the biggest fan, some things that you can do to help. But there's one more kind of negative side of this, I guess, and that's you talk about some behaviors, some I call them the avoiding behaviors that we engage in, I guess, along with our BFF. Talk about these. You have first the numbing behaviors. Talk about those a little bit.
So I talk about these behaviors. These behaviors are important to pay attention to because for those of us that were, and this still happens to me, it's not like I've perfected separating the monger from myself, sure, but I'm much more aware of her voice. Sometimes it's easier to notice the behaviors before we notice, oh my gosh, my monger is running the show. So I will notice that I'm numbing before I can, then that tells me, wait, I'm numbing. What's your monger talking about here? So it's a prompt. So numbing is just anytime, it's over shopping, it's overeating, it's playing on your phone too much. It's, when I check Instagram for the 5th time in the day, what's happening? That's a heads up to me. There's some things going on. It's overeating, over drinking, any of those things where I don't want to feel. So let me just numb out here. And when I'm doing that, that usually is a sign that someone's running the show, the monger, the BFF. Usually if I'm numbing, that means the BFF is talking. Whenever your BFF is talking, your monger is talking as well.
And I thought this one was really good. The drama and judging.
The drama. So this is something I work on with my clients so much, is the idea of, my monger's really loud and she's telling me how I'm unprofessional. I'm never going to get anything done and I should be a better manager. And what's my problem? And then, but I don't want to face that. So I'm going to go into the break room and see that it's a mess and be like, oh my God, what's going on here? We can never keep this place clean. You guys are terrible. What's the deal? And we blow up something over here that's unrelated to what it is we're really dealing with. And it becomes drama, drama, drama. The other thing, so instead of facing the problem head on, we're stirring up crap over here. Mm-hmm. And this happens all the time. I mean, 99% of the crap we're stirring up is because someone somewhere had shame and their monger was talking and they needed to stir up crap to get out of that feeling. So it's really important to pay attention. One of the ones that goes along with that is a 10 reaction to a 2 situation. And, yes, and that's a similar, you come home and you're stressed out from work and your monger's been talking. And then there are the dishes that the kids didn't clean up when you told them to, and you just unload. So that's a little different because it's, it's an anger reaction. It's not a drama, but the drama is the problem because it goes on and on and on. So then people start worrying about this thing over here, and that can go on for a couple of days. I had a client who wouldn't talk to her husband for days around some silly drama. And now because of this monger stuff, they're doing great, but it was all because she would stir up drama when her monger was talking.
Right. And then also the judging part of that, I think, is really interesting.
So this is back to that idea. And this is how I started catching how much I had a BFF, was whenever I'd find myself coming home from a party and I would be judging someone else in my mind. Or I'm, it doesn't relate to this example that I'm late, but if I'm regularly late and you confront me about being regularly late, then my BFF would make it your fault. You're too uptight. You're so rigid. Why, so it's that idea of anytime I get a criticism or anytime I'm feeling attacked, real or imagined, my BFF will come in to attack the other person. I don't particularly, and I don't know many people that will verbally attack you. but they internally, that's how they'll justify what's happening.
Right.
And so just to pay attention, if you are, like I said, I would go out with my girlfriends and we would just judge. If that's what's happening in your life, pay attention, because that means your BFF is running the show and somewhere along the line, you are overwhelmed with the monger.
Yeah. So good. Then another behavior is controlling. And I see this a lot.
I'm laughing because, this is the big one for me. I got this. I can do all this stuff, just keep, I think that is one of the phrases I have in there of I got this. Like, it's the idea of I'm overwhelmed. And so I'm going to control every last detail of this thing to make sure it's okay, because my monger is telling me if I do it perfectly, then it'll be okay. And the only way it's going to be perfect is if I'm doing it. And so I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to reach out. And so if you find yourself getting stuck in that, getting into every last detail or having to follow up with everyone on every little detail, recognize, wait a minute, this is my monger talking. I need to do some work here. That controlling one is a hard one to let go of. That stuff's really hardwired in there. And usually the controlling stuff comes from something in childhood, where you had a chaotic childhood. And so you've learned this ability of controlling stuff. And so it's a little more primal to let go of.
Yeah. And the people who have that issue are listening right now and saying, well, Nancy, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's this is, all of this work. The biggest part of all of this work of the Happy Approach is trust. You have to trust. Not only, you got to let go. The only way you can let go is if you trust. And so it's about being able to let go, finding one person trust. Okay. So that you can trust, and then being able to, practice letting some stuff go to that person is kind of a way to baby steps, because letting go of control is a baby steps thing. So being able to even find someone on your team that you can say, oh, I'm doing it again. Oh, I'm doing that controlling thing again. Or that they can call you out and say, one thing I love about the monger BF, the character names, is someone can say, oh, your monger must be, she must be going today, as a way to say it in a lighthearted way. Or I can say, my monger, I'll say to my husband, gosh, she's having a field day today. And he will know, okay, this is what we're dealing with. So I think sometimes that can be helpful too.
Yeah, I would add that not only do you have to trust other people, you also have to accept that everything may not be perfect. And that's okay if everything's not perfect.
And then
it's hard for people.
Yeah, it's trusting that it's okay if it's not perfect.
It'll be okay. Yeah,
that everything will be okay. Yeah, right. And that's hard because you have the belief that if it's perfect, I'll be saved. And
And the last one, this one really struck me, one, because it struck me personally that I do this, and then also that I see so many other people do this, and that is soldiering on.
So soldiering on, I got that phrase because that was the phrase my mom would say with pride that she did, that she was a soldier on. She still does. She's a soldiering on. Soldiering on is kind of like no matter what comes my way, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And I'm not going to, pile it on, people. I can take more. I got this. And so there's a not, and it is again, back to that idea of people who grew up in chaotic households. We had to soldier on, like you didn't have a choice. And so it's a learned behavior. And the other thing that is hard about soldiering on is it's addictive. Because it's a pride point. Look how much I can take on. I can do all this. It's so amazing. And so it becomes this self-fulfilling, kind of like you're a loser, so you need to soldier on, and then I can soldier on, so I'm a better person. And it becomes this vicious cycle. So the soldiering on and this kind of, if we can, kind of feeds into, because soldiering on really feeds into how to access the biggest fan. The ask process. So is it okay if I jump into that from soldiering on?
Yeah, well, just a minute. Let me tell you how bad I am about this.
Yeah.
In my office, right across on the other side of the wall, I have a huge, kind of like this, but even bigger. I have a huge picture of Prince at the Super Bowl when he played the Super Bowl. And the
Yeah.
reason I have that picture, one, I love Prince. He's my second favorite all-time artist.
Mhm.
But there's a story about when Prince played the Super Bowl. I don't know if you remember, but it was pouring down rain.
Oh, I don't remember.
And right before he was supposed to go out, the producer of the Super Bowl talked to Prince. They didn't know it was going to rain, and then it starts raining.
Mm.
And they contacted Prince and they said, Prince, we're sorry, it's raining. And they said, is there anything we can do for you? And Prince said, can you make it rain harder? Because Prince thought, this is great.
Right.
I'm going to go out there in the pouring rain and I'm going to tear up this performance.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just going to make me look like a bigger hero and all
right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, what a great thing, because that's me. Can you make it rain harder? Bring it on, because I'll soldier on. I'm like Prince. That's a great thing. And I love that, because that's just like, bring it on. So that's my mentality is like, can you make it rain harder? And so that's,
But I think that's still my mentality. I mean, I still have that soldier, it's like I said, it's hardwired. But I think the key to it is what is motivating, what's underneath that. So if I am acknowledging my feelings, if I'm acknowledging the situation, I would argue Prince went into that scenario eyes wide open.
Right.
I know what I'm getting into. I want to do this. This is, I sing Purple Rain. This will be perfect. Whatever,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it goes, it fits, but he wasn't going into it. A lot of times when we get stuck in soldiering on, we're not fully aware. There's a little bit of some mild disassociation that's happening because we're like, I could take it. And physically you can't, it's not possible to do everything that we want to do.
Also, a lot of times it becomes our identity where we turn ourselves into, we're just constant victims with it. Yeah.
And that's the difference. Prince was not a victim in that.
Right.
And I think I'm so glad you said that, because that really is where this soldiering on that I'm talking about comes into, because it becomes a pride point, but then eventually, even if we're not saying that we're victims, we're thinking it. All I do is give. Wow. I know. I'm the strong one. If it wasn't for me, none of this would get done, And so, which is just a toxic way of thinking, instead of, because we're not better than other people. We can't take on more than other, we all have different skills and strengths.
Right.
But
okay, Nancy.
Yeah.
Before we move on to Ask,
yeah,
this is a great time to do the music minute.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about Prince.
Yes.
So one of the things we like to do to get to know people better is learn about the music they like. So Nancy, tell us about maybe some of your favorite artists, songs, concerts, whatever. Tell us about the music that Nancy enjoys.
Well, it's so funny that I have recently just started getting back into my music. For some reason, I just stopped and I just set up my music playlist. So I would have songs that I, like and stuff. My husband and I are big Dave Matthews fans. So we went I turned 50 this year for my 50th birthday. We went down to Cancun and saw Dave and Tim for a 3-night concert on the beach.
Oh, nice.
Which was really fun. But I am a fan. I'm a country fan.
Right.
A little bit. My big reason for loving music is lyrics.
Yeah.
So it's whoever, I'm a huge Sting. I grew up loving Sting.
Oh, yeah.
So he's my big guy. But it was funny. I did an interview with LeAnn Rimes, and she has, I know.
I want to interview her on this show so bad.
But anyway, she does a thing at the end of hers where she has everyone say 5 songs. Oh, you listened to her, so you love it. So but what's funny about that is when I was listening to it to get the inspiration of how I should answer that question, because you always think how I went through and wrote details of lyrics and the lyrics and why I liked that lyric. And most people were just like, oh yeah, here are the 5 songs that I listened to today working out. And I'm like, really? Like I researched to my playlist to come up with them. I wish I had it to share here, but it's it's like Ed Sheeran, all those people that write that soulful,
Right.
super lyrical music.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
So did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
I wish I had
love
more
it.
specifics.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Do you have like a favorite song?
Let's see. One of my favorite songs is Mercy by Dave Matthews Band.
Mhm.
I love Sarah Bareilles. So Brave by Sarah Bareilles is my go-to pump up song. And also there's a song called Fight. I can't remember who says it. It's a
Is that Rachel Platten?
yes, that's my real
Great song.
go-to
Yeah.
pump up song. So
Great
and
song.
then I
Yeah.
walked into my husband and I walked into our wedding with Crazy As Me by Alison Krauss.
Oh, great. She's amazing. She's so good.
Yes. So I love that, her too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Awesome. I love both her albums with Robert Plant. They're such great albums.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Very
Yes.
talented. They're both
Awesome.
super talented. So
Yeah. See, I feel like we know you better now.
yes,
Awesome.
good.
Okay. So we've set up the problem really
Yes,
good. We've got the
yes.
monger, we've got the BFF, we've got the biggest fan there to help a little bit. So tell us about Ask. Ask is how we kind of get out of this.
Yes. So the idea of ask is acknowledge what you're feeling is the A. Slow down. I'm going to go through them overall and then slow down and get into your body is the S. And kindly pull back to see the big picture is the K. Now, I will say that I was really bummed that I had to acknowledge my feelings and I had to slow down and get into my body, that those were key factors. And what I have found through this process is how this whole thing, when I first started back in 2017, acknowledging my feelings was what I would, was awesome and helpful. But now like the deeperness that hits and the quicker I can get into acknowledging my feelings. So I really want to point out that this process kind of unfolds as you dive into it. So it sounds really simple. Oh, this acknowledge my feelings. Okay. But you can dive deeper and deeper and deeper. And I don't care if you practice ask or if you do meditation or you do mindfulness or you have your own practice. All this is a way for you to get out of your head and into your body. Because all of the idea of the monger is doing is keeping us in our head in shame. And we jump back and forth, because what we'll get in this habit of doing is being like, I'm a terrible person, monger, you're such a loser. Okay, well then forget it. It's all their fault. They're the ones that messed it up. And then we bounce back and forth. And that just is anxiety on, steroids. And so we have to get out of our heads, and ask is a way to do that. But there are lots of ways to do that. So I really just want to point out, find the way that works for you.
Right.
But they all, whatever way works for you, they all require you to acknowledge your feelings and slow down and get into your body and get a bigger picture of what's happening. Acknowledging your feelings just means acknowledge that they're there. Acknowledge that you have feelings. Acknowledge that I'm not a robot, that I can't just soldier on. And actually, I can soldier on better if I acknowledge what's really going on. If I acknowledge my fear, if I take a moment to tap into my anger, I can move on quicker. So it is we get stuck in thinking that if I tap into my feelings, it's going to take forever. A great example was this morning. I'm driving home. I had a doctor's appointment. I'm driving home, and I knew there was some stuff that I was ignoring, that I wasn't acknowledging. And I said, okay, you got 5 minutes. 5 minutes. You can acknowledge whatever it is. And I fight that. And I was going to be in the car for another 25 minutes. Like, it wasn't like I was going to see anyone, but I gave myself 5 minutes, and I eventually got there where I allowed myself to have those feelings. And then I immediately feel like this, your whole body just relaxes, because you're so pent up being like, it's not okay to feel this way. Nope. Everything's okay. It's not okay to act on the feelings, but it's okay to acknowledge them. I can be as angry as I need to be at my boss, but I can't go in there and yell at him. Right. I can be as mad at my husband, but I can't hit him. But if I can acknowledge those feelings, some of that wanting to act goes down. And then it is slowing down and getting into your body. And to me, that is a full body movement. That isn't just take a deep breath or, stand up straight or sit up straight. It is, I gotta stand up and I gotta move my whole body, because that's the only way I can get out of my head. It requires a full movement. And sometimes that slowing down and getting into my body means I have to take a little walk. I go for a little walk around the office or around my house, to get myself into my body. And then by the time I've done those two things, I can kindly pull back to see the big picture. And so that's going to pull back to say, what's really important here? What's really the value here? It's not that I'm the most amazing, get it all done person. It's that I get home in time to see my kids play baseball, or it's that I get this report out on time, or it's that, I'm on manager track. I don't know, I'm making things up, but that's what's most important. And when we get stuck in drama, we lose that perspective. And so this is a process of just slowing that all down. Now, I want to say one more thing back to the acknowledging your feelings. For me, what was really impactful, and I still do it, I have them all around the house. I have a list of feelings. And so you can just Google feelings. I have a list of it in the book as well, a copy, because I think sometimes it's so overwhelming to come up with what I'm feeling. And when I can see it on a piece of paper, I can be like, oh yeah, I am pretty angry about this, or I am upset, because I wouldn't allow myself to feel that without the prompt of seeing it.
Yeah, I think that's really good. One of our guests this season is Dr. Mark Brackett, and he trains people on identifying their emotions and their feelings.
Oh.
He has like 100. He has a list of 100, and he has them in different quadrants, and we're going to be talking about that.
Oh, that's awesome.
You can Google it. It's called the Mood Meter, and he teaches
cool.
people how to feel them, and so it's how to identify them, and it's really good.
That's awesome.
So,
because that's, as you get into this, it just, like, you could spend your whole life trying to figure out your feelings. I mean, like, it's just an interesting, like, everyone says, acknowledge your feelings. But in reality, like this mood meter doctor is going to describe, it's a thing. I mean, it's like a PhD in feelings, really. You know what I mean? Like, you could really dive into that.
Yeah. And it's really great. He goes in and teaches elementary students how to get into their students. So it's a really great tool. Yeah. Yeah. So I love what you're talking. You're right on point talking about that. Going back to that, acknowledging what you're feeling. One of the things you talk about in the book, and I've heard it before, and I think it's really good, is talk about how the 90 seconds about feelings. I think that's really important research.
So it's, I can't think of her name. Do you have her?
I don't have the name on.
Oh, shoot. But she came up with this idea. She had a stroke on half of her and lost half. Her brain was separated. Like there wasn't the connection. And she started researching after the stroke. She came back, started researching feelings. And she discovered that a feeling has a 90-second, from the time I think I'm angry at my husband, it runs through my body in a 90, I can't believe he didn't empty the dishwasher this morning. 90 seconds of chemicals and reaction to that. If I don't think about anything else, if I just think that one thought, boom, 90-second reaction. So her point was, what we tend to do is we tend to think, I'm so angry at my husband, I can't believe he did that. And then, so I trigger a 90 seconds and then I go again. He didn't empty it last week either. Again, 90 seconds. And so then I just keep getting stuck in it and stuck in it and stuck in it. I don't allow it to dissipate. My people don't have that problem. Because that's a BFF. That is a BFF material. But more so, what I think people do is they don't allow the 90-second response. So they shut off their feelings and say, it's not appropriate to be mad at my husband, or I should be grateful, or whatever. And then at the end of the day, we just are this walking drama, pincushion of emotions that just flows out of us. And so we get stuck in these, or we'll get stuck in this habit of, like, we'll just blow up, or we'll cry, we'll be over crying, or we'll just have an overreactional response, or we will just go home and numb. So it's really important to pay it. This, I often think I'll have an emotion where I'll be like, oh, that's, something. And I'll be like, wait 90 seconds. Just to let it go all the way through. Did you find her name?
Well, I just Googled I didn't look in the book, and talk about, is it Dr. Jill Taylor?
Yes, Dr. Jill Taylor. Yes.
Yeah.
Jill Bolt Taylor. Dr.
Jill Bolt Taylor. Yeah.
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 Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I always want to give credit,
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an important point, because a lot of times when we, like, especially with anger, it's an important one. Like, a lot of times what we're doing is we're choosing to be angry.
Yes.
We're holding on to that. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, like, grief is something where it's a little different. Like, we're feeling the grief repeatedly. Like grief is a different type of emotion, but anger in particular, like we're choosing to hold on to that.
Yes, correct. Yeah. And that's the idea, this, one of the things around feelings, and I would be interested in this with what's the mood meter man's name?
Dr. Mark Brackett.
Mark Brackett. I'd be interested in his take on this, because I know there's, everyone is like, oh, think your feelings, or change your thoughts, change your feelings.
Right.
I am not a prescriber to that way of thinking, because across the board, I think what Jill Bolt Taylor is talking about is that concept of, wait a minute, I can think I'm angry at my husband, and that's legit. I'm angry at him, but I don't have to keep supporting that anger over and over and over and over and over again, as you're saying, and keeping it fresh in my mind. I can just allow that anger and move on. But sometimes we get so stuck, and I have to justify this feeling. And I have to justify it by finding all this evidence as to why it's okay to feel that way. And it just keeps you stuck in anger. When in reality, if we can just say to ourselves, I'm allowed to be angry, even if it's completely irrational, and you could tell someone and they'd be like, what? You can still feel the anger and allow it. And then it won't come to bite you in the butt later.
Yeah. And that's something that's true with most emotions is as you said earlier, like when we feel them and allow ourselves to feel them, they pass so much faster.
Yes.
It passes so much quicker.
Yeah. It's counterintuitive. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know we're running out of time. The one last thing I want to ask you about is, and I think it's so important, is you talk about another way of overcoming all this is identifying your values. And I think that's so important, is when you identify your values, it helps you, the way I see it is, you're talking back to the monger. It's like you're like, well, monger, that's not important because these are my values. So talk about identifying your values.
Because identifying your values is that idea. And again, Google, you could find a value sheet just about anywhere. But it's being able to, these are I call them the litmus test to my life. Am I living my life on track? In the way I want to be living it. And I'm not getting stuck in what other people think is important. And so on the value sheet that I have in the book, I have, you pick your top 5 values and then you define them for you. And then it's asking yourself, wait a minute, if I look at my life, am I living this value? So one of my values is family. If I look at my life, where's the proof that I am living a value of family? And if, a lot of times I'll have clients fill these out and they'll be like, oh, wait, I'm working too much, or I'm really stuck at in this PTA activity, and I'm not doing family as much as I want to be. And so it's a way to provide some clarity on, this is what's most important to me. And so when my monger will often get me stuck on something that is not important, that's drama, or that's an old message of do this right and you'll be a good person. And I have to come back to be like, wait a minute, this value is actually taking me away from this thought, this crazy monger thing is taking me away from my value of empathy or family or whatever. The other thing about values is they aren't goals. They aren't, things I'm trying to accomplish. They are things that if you look at my life, my goal, my hope is, if you look at my life, you can, and I say to you, these are my top 5 values, you would be like, oh yeah, totally makes sense. I can see that. You ooze that all the time. And that's what we're going for, is that the priorities in my life, that I'm living them. It's a clean all the way through thing. What I say I'm doing is what I'm doing.
Yeah. I love that so much. One one of my favorite sentences in the book is when you talk about values and guilt don't go together. That's so powerful. That's really good.
It's true.
Nancy, this has been such a great conversation. The book talks about all of this and so much more. Goes into so much more details, examples, how to use Ask with so many of these different types of things. So I highly recommend the book. Tell us how people can get in touch with you. I'm sure you do workshops and training on all of this. So
yes.
Tell them.
So I actually have my website is nancyjanesmith.com. I actually have a course called Self-Loyalty School. And it's an audio course that walks you through this whole process in a really detailed way. So that's something you could check out on my website. And I have a blog and podcast and all sorts of things, nancyjanesmith.com. You can go check it out.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time. This has been great. And this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. What a fantastic discussion with Nancy Jane Smith. I'm sure you absolutely loved that as much as I did. Be sure to go and check out her website at nancyjanesmith.com. We're going to do a meditation in just a moment, but I would invite you to go check out our website, pendulumcoaching.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there, and we have a weekly email newsletter. You can check that out. You can also take a look at things that I have there. You can invite me to come speak at your event or for your organization. Be sure to tell your friends about us and go to wherever you listen to the Mindful Leader podcast and do us a favor and rate us there and leave a comment. Comments are really important. Ratings and leaving comments wherever you listen to the podcast is really important. It helps the algorithm and helps people know what you think about the podcast. We hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you enjoyed this episode with Nancy Jane Smith. Let's take a moment and get ready to have a meditation. We always invite you, if you're driving, please be very careful, stay safe. Obviously, don't close your eyes. But wherever you are, I just want to invite you to be comfortable. Place maybe your feet on the ground. If you're sitting up in a chair, place your feet on the ground, maybe your hands on your lap. If you're laying down, that's fine. I'll just invite you to, if you're comfortable, close your eyes. I like to kind of center myself with a few breaths. I invite you to join me. Just inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. One of the things we talked about with Nancy, and that's in her book, The Happier Approach, is the idea of values. And having your own set of values and a good sense of values is a great way of overcoming that monger or that inner critic. You may or may not have thought about your values, what your values are, listed them out, thought about them, defined them. You may have inherited your values from your family, your culture, your upbringing. And that can be okay as long as you've really thought about your values and made your values your own, and not just gone along with whatever you were told, but really defined your own values. I invite you to take a moment and think about what are your top values, maybe your top 3 to 5 values. Do you know what they are? Can you list them? What are the most important things that you hold as your important values? Just think about that for a moment. Now I invite you to think about how your values cause you to live every day. What is it about your values that affect the way you are living on a daily basis? Are they ingrained as part of your daily life? Do they cause you to make decisions differently? Do they cause you to act and behave in a certain way? Think about how they cause you to live out your life. Now think about times when you have had to make difficult decisions because of your values. maybe even times when your values might conflict with each other. Possibly if you have a value of risk and a value of logic, how do you work with those values? Maybe the risk value has tension with the logic value, or maybe your values have caused you to have to make tough decisions in your life, and how your values have helped to be guiding principles in your life. Think about some of the difficult decisions you've had to make because of your values. Let's just be grateful for the opportunity to identify our values, to define them, to clarify them, for the ability to let them guide our lives. Even when it's difficult, they act as that lighthouse for us. Let's inhale and exhale. And inhale and exhale. One more time. Inhale and exhale. And open your eyes. I want to thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of The Mindful Leader. Be sure to check out Nancy Jane Smith's book, The Happier Approach. Be sure to visit her on nancyjanesmith.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on The Mindful Leader.